I experienced discrimination was when I was invited to this birthday party, and Mitzi said, you won't be able to go swimming in the crystal pool. She said, Asians aren't allowed in there. My brother and my sister and my friend's father was a steam engineer down there, and I couldn't believe it, And so I was invited to this party, and sure enough, I wasn't able to go. So, our relationship cooled after that. We were great friends, and I thought if it was my mother and something like that happened, she wouldn't have included the pool in the party,
Oh, that's right.
if somebody couldn't go.
Yeah.
And so I thought, no, that wasn't very good.
Let's backtrack a bit. Can you tell me your name, where you were born, and when you were born?
Sueko Okamoto, and I was baptized as Mary on November the 16th, 1925, at 3443 Whittier Avenue.
Is that where you were living?
And the midwife was Mrs. Koyama.
Now, how many brothers and sisters do you have, and where do you fit in there?
I was the second youngest of a family of 8. And apparently, when my mother first came from Japan, she had a child in, what year was it? And the child died, I think, of pneumonia. And so she was only 3 months old, 2 or 3 months old. So what a sad thing, So there actually had been 9 births in our family. But when I was born, I remember Mitzi always said that was she ever jealous because the kettle was singing, and Mrs. Koyama said, oh, the kettle's singing for your little sister. And I think she said, oh, bah. And she said, well, Mom says, come on, come by me. But she said she knew she didn't want me. And then, of course, being the middle child, Irene was a sweet, sweet child. And she wasn't temperamental like me. And so everybody loved her, And she's the one that got the blonde doll, and I got the dark one, and I was always jealous. Isn't that bad?
So Irene's the youngest then?
Mm-hmm. Okay. We were 4 years younger than each other.
Okay.
There was 4 years apart between Irene and I and Mitzi and I. And then there was at least 2 between the others.
Okay.
I've got to blow my nose.
I think we should turn on the light.
Oh, sure. Yep, here.
That's good.
I think I was the brat in the family. I know I was. Because I was very stubborn. And so they'd always say to me, you can't get rid of your temper by losing it.
Who said that?
They'd always tell me that. And my mother was really laid back because, we always went fishing out on the railroad tracks out to Colquitt's, which was quite a ways. And we went the other way too, and past Swan Lake and all that way. And, I guess, I don't know if she ever worried about us, because I thought if it were my kids, I'd really be upset, But we had we fished, and we did all the things kids, and, we had a great gang in our neighborhood. So, you play the usual games, kick the can, run, sheep, run,
Did you hang out mostly with Japanese kids?
No, there were no Japanese in our neighborhood.
Oh.
And so I had 2 friends that went to school, Chinese friends who went to school with me. But I was really bossy, but very shy. And, like when I went to school, my chums didn't go when I did because they were born later, like in the new year, and they didn't accept them. So I was there alone. So, when I first went to school, I'd pretend I had to go to the bathroom, and then I'd come home, and I'd hide under the porch, and they never knew until the teacher reported that I wasn't at school.
What school did you go to?
Tommy. And it later became the district office for the Saanich department, I guess, educational district. And it was amazing because when I went out there many years later, the fellow who was the superintendent of the school maintenance or whatever, he had his office there, and he took me through the halls of my old place, and they were still oiled floors, and you could see the dips in the wood from the treads, eh? And I'm sure the school's still there. And as you come down, it's on the corner it's on Boleskine. But if you come down Saanich Road and Douglas Street, and then Boleskine, you can see it. So, when you're coming in from that way, if you come down Douglas Street, you can see the school, and it always gives me because we would march into Men of Harlech, that good Welsh song, and the teacher would pound it on the piano, we'd have to line up. And I don't think I missed, I don't think I missed hardly any days of school. I remember one day I said to my mom, I'm not going, I don't feel well. And as soon as I heard the phone ring, the bell ring, I jumped out of bed and went into school. So I had deportment, is that what they called it? For perfect attendance.
Were you a good student?
Pardon?
Were you a good student?
Yes, and I was accelerated, which I don't believe in. Because, I was wanting to still play with dolls when I was in high school, and I was the youngest kid there, and I was so naive,
How was your relationship with your siblings when growing up in Victoria?
Oh, good. I think Mitzi always said, well, they favored me, and maybe it was because I wasn't a baby, and he felt I was the middle child, sort of, And Mitzi, she was a tomboy, and she was always with the boys, and she loved to do hair. She loved to babysit, but she was off, and so that's why I don't think she remembers all the things that I do. Okay. And my mother, we would make my brother's lunches, and polish their shoes, and polish their spoons to go fishing with Brasso, and we'd get 10 cents, which my brother Stum would put into a dime bank. They had those banks that when you got $5, and he would put it into the bank for us, And I was a real bad chicken. I remember, they'd have to come and hold my hand in the dentist's office or anything. And as I told you, or I told somebody, I'm the only one that didn't have a vaccination because I screamed and hollered, I'm sure, and they figured it wasn't worth it. So I guess that's why I didn't want to go to Japan either. Because, in those times you had to have a vaccination. That would be like in the 50s, And my cousins, my uncle wanted to take me several times, but anyway.
Is that when you were younger he was trying to take you?
Yeah, well, I wasn't that young. I was in my 20s.
Oh, okay. Your mother was a good baker?
Yeah, she was a good cook.
Oh, she was a good cook.
Excellent cook, and I don't know how she learned, but I'm sure she just observed and as I said, that her fruit cake, which was based probably on, the Takata Tea Gardens tea cake. My sister-in-law took the recipe home with her, and gave it to a friend, and it won a national prize. But I never had the recipe. So, I just kind of tried it myself.
You won a national prize in what contest?
Well, I don't know, I'm sure it was in one of these baking contests or something.
Okay. And when was that?
Oh, probably.
Was that before
50
the war?
years ago?
50 years
No,
after the war.
After the war. Because Marion took it out to her club, Marion Okamoto. And she was, and being that she always was a stay-at-home mother, everybody converged at our place. And as you know, you've got 8 kids, eh? There's always kids around. And the police were always there too, because if someone broke a window or, because they always played ball around our place. And they would know that if we didn't do it, we knew somebody that did, So my poor dad was always fixing windows, and he was always mad. He was a strict disciplinarian with the older kids. But, by the time we came along, he was tired.
When did your dad and Mom come to Canada? How old were you?
Well, my dad came in 1899, and they were married in September of 1898. So she was left, and she was only 16 when she was born in 1882.
And your father?
And my dad was born in 1880. And so, anyway, I think she eventually had to borrow money to come, And she looked after 3 generations, I think, of men in the family. And the Okamotos had a store. And at that time, Oshima was not attached to the mainland, so they had to go over by boat. Now I think there's a bridge, apparently. And so they imported from the mainland, so they had I think they had a thriving business.
So this was in Japan?
And my dad was, well educated. But being the oldest, I think he wanted to get out of going in the army or whatever, because with the Manchurian War been around there.
So is that why he came to Canada?
I think to better himself and to,
Did he have any other relatives or siblings that came with him?
No.
He came alone?
I'm not sure whether he came alone or whether he came with somebody, but anyway, he came. And then he didn't send for my mother, so I think somebody loaned her the money and, she came.
She had to go on her own?
Oh, she came with other people
okay.
too, But she said that I think they traveled from Yokohama.
Yes.
I think, and it was 14 days or something, across the seas, and you landed in Victoria. And, my dad's English was such. And I remember he'd always talk about the seashell. And I found out it was seashell he was talking about. So I think at one time he may have lived there. And then he talked about Kopsaila. And I thought, what's that? And there was a little train stop going up island, and I noticed when I rode on the train or something, and it said Kopsaila, and I thought, that's what he used to talk about, And so they lived all over, but Shawnigan was where the older siblings were born, and then
Is that all Vancouver Island?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just about 25 miles from Victoria, and so anyway, then they moved down to Victoria, and I think they had another place before they moved to Whittier, and I think my dad built the house there. And then he was building another house on that land or something. It was a partially so that he could store things. And my brother, Sam, they, like Hattie, quit school, a lot of them quit school in grade 8 because they had to go to work, because they had to support the rest of us, eh? And, but she certainly, went to night school and bettered herself. I admired her because she took typing and she took cake decorating, hairdressing, sewing, and she worked as a county striper, so she made the best corners on your sheets for the beds. And so, we were really a happy family because our siblings really looked after us too, and Mus was very generous. He'd take us fishing sometimes out to Brentwood, and he would take us, if people came, he said, come on, would you like to go for a ride, and he would take us all too,
What was your father's occupation?
He was a carpenter and a gardener, but he did carpentry and like when he worked for this Justice Hunter, I think he was like a scout, and he did work of all trades. I remember they apparently had a beautiful dog called Togo, and my mom said, it wouldn't eat from anybody but my dad, and he was offered like $250 in those days by some hunter for it, but they said no, they wouldn't sell it, and they went somewhere, and the poor thing had got his leash stuck on the house, and he was hanged. So it was very sad.
Do you remember this dog?
I don't, but because I wasn't even born then,
Oh,
but
okay.
my mother talked about this beautiful dog, and how it wouldn't eat from anybody but my dad. But he would say to it, I'm going away, Togo, so you eat from Mom, and it would obey her, right?
Intelligent dog?
Yeah. And my mom used to say, when you think, if they told me, I'll chop off your head, I'd say, okay, because she said, I didn't know what they were saying.
So what was it like growing up in Victoria?
I really enjoyed it. And I felt like my brothers were busy working, and my brother Tomo said, I'm going to put you through university. So I felt when I graduated, I was only 16 because I had accelerated. So I thought I'd go to St. Anne's Academy and take a commercial course because I thought it would be beneficial. And then I thought in those days you had to go to UBC, and I thought I don't want to go over there. But, there was the college, but I don't think it was accredited with the university because I wanted to be a teacher. And so anyway, and of course that's when this all happened.
So were you 16 when the war broke out?
It was 41. Yeah. I just turned 16.
Now, what was the Japanese community like in Victoria? Was it very active?
We didn't have that much, I didn't have that much to do with them, but people always came out to visit, like the Maritas, Ruby Fukumoto and her family, Herbie, and their parents, and the Takahashis, and, Toyo, and they came to see my brothers and that, but, and a lot of them all came out, but we didn't, generally speaking, I didn't have that much to do with them because all my friends were Caucasian, really my close friends.
So your other siblings may have hung out with the Japanese more than you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did, because they were older, right? And they went to the JCL things,
Oh, okay. But you weren't involved in that?
No, I was just dragged to hear the oratorical contest, so they'd think I'd get something out of it.
So you were a good singer, though?
I was at one time until I decided to play the bagpipes on my larynx, and that was a tomboy thing too. So it was very disappointing for my teacher, who had high hopes for me, and I remember going to Oak Bay United to sing for Dr. McClure. He was a missionary in China, and I can still remember singing Jesus Wants Me for a sunbeam, and So, and then my career as a singer ended.
Oh, no.
But when I came out here, I cultivated it, and I sang in the church choir for a long time until my accident again. But we went to church all the time, and they had the breakaway Presbyterians or whatever they were. And so I went to this Parkdale Sunday School, and at night I went to Erskine Presbyterian Church. And so it seemed, and the Japanese United Church, or it was the Japanese Mission. I thought it was United Church, but it was Japanese Mission. My friend, Burl Humphrey's dad, was the superintendent of it. So she said, oh, please come, But, it was too much, He'd pick us up and take us down, but then to come home and rush and go to another Sunday school at night. But I remember we were great card players. And my mother was very strict about that. And so one time we had a fire on our block, and I ran with a deck of cards out to see the fire, and it was a Sunday. Wow, did I ever get it? My mother said, what will the neighbors think, playing cards on Sunday? And she was really upset with me.
This was still in Victoria? Oh, my. So your mother was a good cook. She was a strict mother. But
she never believed in using the rod. She says, if you can't talk to them, there's no sense. And she was like, everybody came to her for advice because she quit school. In those days, you didn't have to go. So she wasn't well educated because she said the kid kept putting her hair in the ink brush, and he was really mean, or he'd scribble, And so she said, I quit. But my dad was well educated. And they were just the opposites. My mother was conservative. My dad was a gambler.
Was he really?
Yes.
Oh no, was that a problem in your family?
Well, he would go down to Chinatown and gamble. And the one time that my mother got really, really upset was we had this bank for the kids, and I think he took the money from that and went. So she always said, whatever you do, don't marry a minister, a doctor, or a gambler, or a drinker. And like my dad didn't drink, until later.
Who were some people that came to ask advice to your mother?
Well, like all these young, like Sumo and Aichi, and they'd talk to her. And
is that a Shimizu?
Yeah, and the condos, and because she was available, And then lots of other, after we moved here too, lots of them would come and ask her advice.
Oh, wow.
And I remember her saying to this Catholic person who was expecting about her fourth child, and she thought, no, she shouldn't have this child. And my mother said to her, Carol, nobody cries because they have too many, but people cry because they don't have any. So use your head. And of course that child turned out to be her best kid, most loyal. So, and then she had several after that.
Did you speak in Japanese with your parents, or did they speak in English?
Not really. Mitzi is quite fluent. But of course she went to Marietta School of Dress Design, and they all spoke Japanese. A lot of them over there, they didn't speak English. And, but like when we were in the process of evacuating, the Anglican minister, sent a petition around saying, look, they're better citizens than we are, so why are they having to go? We should have them stay. But of course it didn't look good.
You were with the United Church of your family?
In those days, not really. And I went to Junior WA, which is the Anglican. As I said, I went to this Parkdale Sunday School. It was a break-off of the Presbyterian. And then I went to Erskine Presbyterian at night to sing in the choir.
So when the war happened and your family was told to evacuate, what was the reaction? Were all your siblings living at home at that time, or were some of them
Well,
living?
Betsy was living in Vancouver, and Sam decided to get married.
Is he the eldest?
No, he's the second eldest. And so he went over to Haney, and he lived over there, and then, I think in May, they moved out to the sugar beet fields, or April or something, with the gospel church, because he became a Jesus person, like gospel church. But we were quite conservative. And I guess we went to, lantern slides and different rallies of gospel church too. I remember the first time I ever had jelly was at a Christmas party at Oakland's Gospel Hall where Sam went. And it was so good, and we had never had it before. We wondered what it was, And as I said, if there was any trouble in the community, because all the kids would come and play soccer and tennis, and they'd put the nets across the telephone poles and across the road, and they'd play ball and do everything. So my dad was in constant, demand to fix windows and everything. So poor guy. And I can remember this one fellow, an Englishman, I think they didn't have work sometimes, and they had no family, and she was a pet. She would pay us 10 cents to go and get her groceries or mail letters for her. But he was a stinker, and he'd say, I'm going to report you for having this and that. And he was always making trouble for my dad if he didn't have a job. And then these people that lived in that big brick house, there were just 3 of them. And we've still kept in touch with them too, And I don't know if I told you, but we would rush out to see who would have their flag up on special occasions. Like we flew the Canadian Ensign, whereas they flew the Union Jack because he was Dykes. And he had it right across his portico, a great big Union Jack. And we'd have our flagpole, And they were always betting on the fights, who would win, like pennies. So, and like all the guys would hang around our place too, like the hunters and that, and the fishermen, because they'd ride the rails up island to go fishing. And, hunting, I mean. And they ride their bikes, but they were all, they all had that common interest. And I've kept in touch with them still, after my parents. And this one fellow, George Walton, after the war, he became a big contractor, and he was really glib. So he made oodles of money. And they had a beautiful home out in Victoria on Beach Drive. And he would come out every fall to hunt pheasants, And he always came to our place for Thanksgiving. But anyway, before his children grew up, he'd bring his wife and children. And the kids said they all became, did he have 6 children? And they became very professional. And they said, they remember your mom for how kind she was, and she always had this woven change purse beside the fridge, and she always gave them a quarter or 50 cents or what, and said, have a treat on your way, and she said, the kids said they always remembered that and how kind she was to them. So, and that was it. Like in Tabor, they all called her Grandma Oak and Pop Oak, And everybody knew them because her house was open always. The latch room was always open. And I feel the same way, you know. People don't have to have an invitation to come to my place. They're very welcome. And we can always throw a meal together, you know. So
your family was well respected and they had to leave Victoria and they chose to go to the sugar beets.
well, just the girls.
Just the girls.
And Keach and Mitzi were engaged.
Okay.
And he didn't want to, they wanted to get married. Like, she went with him since she was 16. And she had to get permission to get married because she wasn't 21. But they arranged it. And so he came on his honeymoon with all of us. And so anyway, he was a really good brother-in-law, you know, took care of us.
There had to be a certain number of men to come to the sugar beets?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Okay, because that's what I heard from other people.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Because, you know, there was only us girls.
Really?
Yeah, my dad and Keach for a while, and then they went on their own.
So how many girls were left by then?
So there was Hattie and I and Irene, and of course Irene was young, eh? She was only
Because if you were 16, you'd be 12.
Yeah, she was 11 when everything started.
So you had your brother-in-law, your father, and then your mother.
Mm-hmm. But my mother didn't work in the field. She was the cook.
Oh, okay.
She baked bread almost every day on a little wee old coal stove, you know.
Oh,
The heat of some. She had a tablecloth on the table every day. I don't know how she did it. And then when school started, Irene was the first Japanese to go to school. They got her in. So she never missed any years.
This was in Tabor?
Yeah.
You came to Tabor.
Mm-hmm. And my mother walked her from far on the south side to Central School right here every day. Oh. And she'd climb over the train or under the train, and we'd be so afraid because we'd be waiting for her to bring out our lunch to the beet field. And
now, how did the families hear about the sugar beet farms? Did someone come around, or was it announced?
I think it was just known that these were the options, you know. And, you know, my mother felt that it was not a particularly good atmosphere in Hastings Park.
Oh, so you were in Hastings Park for a while.
Yeah, we were in from April the 23rd till June the 12th, I think we left.
Was your father in a road camp?
No, my dad was with us.
In Hastings Park. And how was the experience in Hastings Park?
I thought it was, you know, like we didn't mind because we were kids and we played ball and, you know, life was a breeze. We didn't even think of the future. But my parents, I'm sure, were very worried because their money would run out. And as far as the, you know, I never lived among Japanese, and as I said, I always thought they were the perfect race. They would never steal. They wouldn't be dishonest, you know. And yet I found out that, you know, in a situation like that, the worst comes out in everybody. And they were just awful. Like, people were terrible to other people. But, you know, the people were always good to us because, I guess, you know, we treated them the same way. And it was funny because we met Toyo's brother, whom we hadn't known. He had worked up somewhere else, you know. But, and he was in the baggage room, you know. We called them the baggage boys because if you wanted something out of your suitcase, you had to go and ask them to take it down for you.
Oh, you weren't allowed to take your suitcase with you?
No, these great big ones, you know. We had one suitcase. Okay. Didn't I show you? Well, you've seen the suitcases with the numbers on them, haven't you? I've still got all the ones.
Oh my gosh.
For everybody. And my son took my mother's trunk, you know, metal trunk, to Bermuda with him. And he still has it.
Oh my God.
He used it as a coffee table and took all the stuff in it.
That's funny.
So it's traveled.
Yes, it has. So after Hastings Park, you came to Tabor. Now, you took a train over?
Mm-hmm.
Did you stop in Calgary?
Yes, we did, just for the afternoon.
And how was
But
that trip?
I remember at Revelstoke, they said watch it because, and people were sleeping above us in the in the baggage compartment. It really got crowded. And then when we got to Calgary, people were, we had the freedom to, and so we had to buy dishes. We bought a few dishes and things like that. And I think, was it Mr. Matsuoka? He met every train that Japanese were on. And I think we met him. But anyway, he told us to go to the bay and whatever. And so then we came to Lethbridge, and we had to have accommodation for the night because we got in late at night. So we went down the telephone book and started at the A's, and I'm sure it was the Alexandria. And they didn't take us. And then the Arlington, it was like a flea bad. It was down, I'm sure they said the red light district. Down by the railroad tracks, and that's where we stayed for the night. And then we went, it was really nice because we went to the restaurant in the morning, and it was a coffee shop. And it was owned by these Clarks, and they were so kind to us. That made our day. They were really kind to us.
Now, how are your parents reacting to this whole situation? Everything's going by so quickly.
Well, as I told you, I'd never seen my mother cry, and that just broke my heart. I'll never forget that. She's, and she said, "What God-forsaken country are we going to?" And of course, when we got to the farm, this fellow, every time we told somebody we were on his farm, what? He's the worst farmer around. And he'd say one price and then he'd change it. But he did have a raspberry patch, and we were able to pick raspberries and earn some money. And he had a huge asparagus patch, so we could have as much asparagus as we wanted. And when they found out that Mitz and Keach were still on their honeymoon, they let them stay in a bedroom in the house for one night.
Oh, that's nice.
Because otherwise they lived in the same one room as we did. No wonder they didn't have kids for 11 years, eh?
So did you have to live in a shack?
Well, it was newly built, but there was, the walls weren't finished or anything. You could see the sky. And it went to 52 below that year.
Oh my God.
And so, we didn't have beds. So my dad made them, and we had, I think my siblings sent out mattresses, and but from our body heat and no thing, they'd be wet, so we'd have to put them up during the day so they could dry out, So it was really something. And of course you had to haul your water from the cistern. And so, Mom would say, oh, I guess it's because we use so much water. That's why we're suffering.
Was there electricity?
Mm-mm. We had the Sam and Tats bought us an Aladdin lamp for Christmas, and we had a mantle lamp, but we just had coal lamps. Nobody had electricity. It didn't come in till later.
Who else from Victoria came to the
Nobody.
area? No one?
No, we were the only ones. Everybody else went to ghost towns or out east, but we were the only ones that came here. Although, I think Hayashis ended up in Raymond eventually, but I'm sure they were in the ghost towns before that.
Oh, okay.
And then people from the Oriental Home, have you heard about that? They had an Oriental Home in Victoria.
Yeah.
And some of them went to Fort Qu'Appelle or something, and then some of them came back this way or whatever, But we had no Victorians. We had to start from scratch making friends. And the church here they reached out to us, the United Church, and they decided they'd form a social club for us. And so we met in the church basement and jived on Sunday nights, played cards. I don't think the congregation knew that, but the minister did.
What was the group called? Was there a name?
The XBCs.
XBCs.
XBCs. And I'm sure I've got a shirt still. And they had the ball team, and they really integrated because they said, when they found out that they were good workers and they dressed well, they spoke well, they were highly educated, for the most part. So they were really, welcomed into the community eventually, although initially I guess they had this meeting saying, are we going to let them come in? And they said, well, to save the crop, we've got to have someone come, But some of the places that they put them into, it was, they wouldn't even abide by them now,
Was your family more well off than some others, or do you think everyone was relatively the same?
Which family?
Your family.
You mean in Victoria or Tabor?
In Tabor.
Not really. My brothers went into construction, and we weren't well off because I remember the first time we ever borrowed money was $1,000 to build our house.
Oh my God, when was that?
1949.
1949. Were you still working on that same farm? The sugar beet farm?
Mm-hmm.
And when was
but
this?
I had gone to school in Calgary and taken a secretarial course.
So you left partway through then. What year was that?
I left in 46 and went to Calgary. But I graduated in 42, so, 4 years but I had to earn money to go, and secretarial was the cheapest.
Okay.
So I kept house for a family who was my good friend, and because they had lost their mother to cancer, and she said, do you think you could come and keep house for us? And I took home ec at school. So I thought, sure. My mother never let me cook, but I didn't even know how to cook rice when I got married.
Was this a Japanese family then?
No.
No?
Patterson, Scottish.
Oh, okay.
And so, he became like a surrogate grandpa to my kids.
That's good.
And so anyway, we, settled in. And I must tell you something interesting. When my husband had his accident, I was at the hospital every day for like 6 weeks, 2 months. And I went to chapel at Easter, and I met this Dick Davenport. He was the hospital chaplain. And I said, oh, my sister worked for some Davenports in Victoria. I said, do you have relatives in Victoria? And he said, I grew up in Victoria. Because I said, my sister worked for a Davenport family. And he said, was she Haruko? We always wondered what happened to you. And we became immediate friends, and he was so wonderful. And he died of ALS. And so up until his death, I kept in touch with him. And anytime anybody had to go for open heart or in Calgary. So, I always thought God works in mysterious ways, and brings people into your lives. And I think our family, we have a deep faith, and Mitzi especially. She has a very deep faith. And
do you think this faith or believing in the church and that helped you through these years?
Oh, yes, very much so. The church has always been really supportive, so I feel I, have to give back. And as my mother, she had this terrific philosophy, and I wrote down somewhere, but all these points to give to my kids, because she said, do a good turn for somebody every day. If you think of someone, give them a call. They don't know you. Do it before it's too late. And she said, if you phone an elderly person, you'll make their day. Or even if you say hello to them, And she, of course, she always practiced, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And she said, when my husband died, she said, it's really hard, but you have to be thankful for what you have. You've got 2 beautiful children. You don't have to worry about money because we were insurance poor from our business. And, I had my house and I had my education. And so she said, just look around at someone less fortunate than yourself and then you won't feel sorry for yourself. And that was another thing. She said, watch these guys that come at your door. And I laughed because my next door neighbor was really nosy. And every time someone came to my place, like a friend brought something, like Bruce Milton would come and bring me something, or H. Kittigal would be over, I'd say, sit in front of the window. I'd open the drapes because she'd say, who was that at your place?
When was the XBC group formed?
It was formed probably in 1940, the winter of 42.
It was early on then.
Yeah.
So they did come down quickly.
They did. And they were wonderful. And Barty, she worked with the WMS and she did religious training in Raymond and out at Reliance here in Barnwell.
Okay.
So she would always come pick me up and I'd go up to Reliance just for the ride. She could change a car tire faster than anybody I ever saw. But I was in an accident with her in Vancouver. But I met Ray Iwasa.
Yes.
Do you know him?
No, not personally.
No. Well, anyway, he was in Texas Parliament and I was in CGIT and we slept on her floor, I think it was Texas Parliament. I remember we slept on her floor in the living room. And of course no sleeping bags in those days in Lethbridge. And that's how I met him, I guess. And they were, she was always wonderful and she always said, come on, get off your butt and you better get going, And so then I decided eventually, And even when I went to Calgary in 46, I still had to receive permission to go into the city of Calgary to go to school. I had to have a letter, and I had to report to the RCMP that I was going. But I threw up my hands and I said, if they want to come after me, that's fine. I'm going and they don't have to know where I am.
What school did you attend in Calgary?
Henderson School of Business.
And that was for about a year?
It was just, I completed it in 9 months or 8 months. So then I was working.
Did you go back to Tabor?
Yeah, I came back to Tabor
and
I worked for a law firm.
Ooh. Now, were your parents still farming?
They were still on the farm at the time.
How long did they continue
And
for?
they continued till 49. And Irene and I lived in town. And we lived with this Bob Patterson. Because his kids had gone, and he said, why don't you come and live with me? And we'll make a deal and I'll cook breakfast. We'll fiddle for lunch and you can make supper and, the room's free, So we lived with him.
So people were relatively nice to you then?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Mitzi worked for all the bankers' wives and they said, you're the hard worker because she did housework. So they would make her eat and, sit at the table with them. And they said, you've got to have big food because, you're the hard worker. And yeah, I worked for this Mrs. Cannon, and she put on airs, but they were poor as church mice, but they were still in that elite group, where you took your calling card. And she said, oh, well, do you have your big meal at night usually? So she'd give me a poached egg, and she'd be dining on steak.
Aww.
And yet I'd have to, wax her floors by hand and polish them by hand, that kind of thing. Pull out her cinders and all that.
Oh my God.
You know, so it makes a difference, eh? You know. And but people were wonderful, and you know, we've kept in touch with a lot of the people that we worked for, and we became really close friends. Like when we came to Tabor, these people wanted us to go and clean for them, or Hattie was a terrific ironer, and so we did that, and we remained friends, you know, and still remain friends. And they said, oh, you know, we feel like you're part of our family, because they were kids, you know, when we went to help them.
What did your parents do after they left farming? Or your father?
My dad, he asked if he could go to the cemetery and, you know, work around the cemetery. And he rode a bike, and it's 2 miles out of town on a gravel road. And in fact, my dad was really something else. He rode his bike to Lethbridge twice.
Oh my gosh.
And it was, you know, gravel roads practically. And the first time, I think the second time he went up to the Galt Hospital and waited for Irene to come off. And he said, I thought you'd be so proud of my doing it. And she said, what are you doing here? Did you tell Mama? And he said, no. She said, you just get back on that train and go home. And he said, oh, my baby wasn't proud of me. She got mad at me.
That's funny.
But he did it twice, you know.
Wow.
And he always rode his bike, and he'd sing at the top of his lungs in Japanese. And he was the first caretaker of the hospital, but he did it for free if anybody wanted their things tended to.
Is the
He
hospital
would look after, not the hospital, the cemetery.
The cemetery.
He would do it, you know. He would order from Morden, and he'd, you know, and I remember Johnny Longton gave him $20 American to look after his parents' graves, and I think he looked after them for 10 years.
Oh my God.
And he said, my dad would say, I really like it down there because nobody talks back to me. But anyway, one time, you know, they dug the graves by hand, and he went down at sort of twilight, and he was doing something and singing at the top of his lung, and he didn't think anybody was around, and someone said, hi, George, and he said, gee, I almost jumped in the hole. It was this guy digging this grave.
That's funny.
But he bought 10 plots for $5 each. I think I've got the original bill. I've got the original bill of sale. And we said 10 plots. And you know, so many of them were filled already.
Oh.
But my dad he was to show how queer he was. He bought 10 plots, 5 here and 5 there. And when my brother died in 1956, he put him right down the middle. And so we said standing room only on either end.
Oh my gosh.
And that's, you know, they figured that's it. So we've never utilized that particular unit, you know.
That's too funny.
Isn't that funny?
That is funny. And where are your parents buried then?
And they're buried there.
They are.
Yeah, so there's my husband's buried there, and then my brother said he wanted to be brought back, so his wife brought his ashes, and she wants to be buried here too. So.
Where was your brother at the time?
Winnipeg.
Oh, Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they moved to Winnipeg. And he became a steam engineer by correspondence, so I really admire all my brothers, you know, to get all their education thing. And I think it was from SAIT.
How about your sisters? What did they do?
Well, Mitzi did dress design, so she made a lot of clothes at one time for people. And then she became a bookkeeper, and she she just looked after the accounts receivable and sent out the bills at the supermarket, which was Fong Brothers. And Hattie became a cashier, and she was really a dedicated cashier. And then Irene, of course, took in nursing. And she was the supervisor, she was the supervisor of nursing in the OR.
Now, when your parents left the farm, who was still working with them? Because you had gone to school.
Tomo and Stump came back.
Oh, they did?
Mm-hmm.
Where were they?
They were out in, Tomo I think was in London, working at the foundry. And Stump was he in Glencoe or somewhere? No, maybe Kapuskasing, and he broke his leg. And so after that, he came back because he thought, we needed help, because otherwise, how could they do it,
He was sent to Kapuskasing?
I think they told me they worked on the Trans-Canada Highway, and then they went to Camp Black, and they worked at Kapuskasing and Schreiber and various places, that are indicated there. And then they went to Chatham and all over down south. They worked for Farm Service League or something.
How many years was he there for?
Stump came back. I think he came back he must have come back when I went to school in Calgary.
So it's about 46?
47.
47?
Yeah.
And your other brother too came?
Yeah, he came back
about the same time.
around then. Or maybe 48 or something.
Now you went for school in Calgary, you came back, you were working for a law firm.
Yeah, for $60 a month, can you believe? And he said, 3 months already. So he said, oh, did I say that?
Oh my gosh. And how long were you there for?
I worked there, and then he passed away.
Oh.
But his partner, Fred Pritchard, took over. So I was his first actual secretary. And I worked there till 52, and I was very disillusioned because they practically kicked our minister out, and the way they did it really, really got to me. And so I decided, I was saying to my friends, Dubois, gee, maybe I'll join the forces. Maybe I'll go work for the UN or something, And he said, don't go into the army or anything, because, everything is relegated, and it's all, you have no initiative to advance. In those days, everything was handed to you. So anyway, I went to Calgary, and I ran into discrimination then, because they said, well, we don't, it was the unemployment person. She said they don't hire Japanese. But she never asked them or anything. So I thought, hell you. And I thought, I'll just go on my own. So I followed up in the ads. And I got excellent. And, I had lots of friends in Calgary. So I'd go and eat with them, do things. And I had a place to stay. And so anyway, I lived at the Y a while, and I got this job on my own at a very prestigious law firm, and I became secretary to the up and coming, young lawyer. And so it was great, and even the head honcho, Marsh Porter, I was right outside his desk at his room, but his secretary was in his room, sort of adjacent to his room.
Okay.
And so, anyway, he was a good liberal, and my former boss down here was a liberal. And so, he had asked if I knew of any Japanese girls that would go and work for them. And I got this Betty Tomiyama to go out and work for them. So when I got engaged, it was really funny because we always ate in the staff room, all the big bosses and everybody. And I don't know if I was showing off my ring or not, but he told Betty that I was to have a party, she was to have a party for me at their place, way up in the Hoity, Eagle Ridge. And, but I said, no way. So, so I did work for a company up there for a long time.
How did you meet your husband?
Well, his sister and I were friends, and he had access to a vehicle, so we'd get rides home with him.
Ooh, that's nice.
And I don't know, we just all ran around together, like in the Calvinese Club. We bowled and we did oratory and curled and did other things, you know. So anyway, we...
So you hung out with the Japanese crowd in Calgary?
And yet I hung around with my friends from the office too, and I had friends at the Y, and I played tennis and that. So, you know.
So you make friends easily around anywhere?
And then these co-hairs, they always had all the Japanese over, and then, you know, Jerry and Tosh Nagata, they always had us all over and that, you know. So, yes, I make friends very easily, and, you know, as I say, if you're my friend, you're my friend for life. You know how some people go from friends to friends, but, you know, most of my friends, I've had them forever. So I'm like my son. I think I still send about 100 Christmas cards, letters, because my friends are from Newfoundland to all over.
Oh, wow.
And over in Ireland and that. So, you know, I keep in touch. And they expect me to. And my son David is the same, and he writes a Christmas verse. And whereas my daughter, she doesn't send one card, and she just phones.
Oh, okay.
But then she has a close circle of friends, and she has lots of friends, but she doesn't really keep in touch with them that much, you know.
Now, your husband is originally from Alberta, right?
Yeah, he was, and
was his way of thinking different or anything?
His family's way of thinking was very different. And they weren't too impressed with our getting married because I was United and he was Buddhist background.
Oh.
So we got married in High River and we didn't tell, we told the family, you know, and they weren't impressed. But by that time we were married. And they were really not too accommodating. And so anyway, I think that, you know, I was I think Tack was the most thoughtful, and my mother would say to him, you know, Tack, your mother raised